There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. So we're starting Genesis. Genesis is the Greek name from the Hebrew name Bereshith, which means beginning or birth. And this book is attributed to have been written by Moses. That, along with the other 4 books, which make 5 books of the beginning, which is called the Pentateuch, which Pentateuch means 5, because he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. And we can read about Moses in the book of Acts in 7:22, and we're told that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians because he was the son of Pharaoh's daughter. But this book of Genesis, this is not Egyptian theology. The Egyptians, they had many gods, they had many myths of creations, along with all the other cultures of the world. They all had their own myths. And there may have been something that Moses had written from the records in Egypt, but this is not Egyptian theology. And this also isn't the theology that was passed down to Abraham from the land of Ur, where he came from, because Abraham's family, they were a bunch of idolaters, and all their gods were limited gods. And Abraham was called away from that world to follow the only true God. But there had to be some kind of records passed down to Moses because he compiled such an excellent work. So it also had to have been revealed to Moses by God himself, because when we get to Exodus, we see Moses and he sits with God every day face to face, and they talk. And if you look at the timeline of the Bible and you look at the timeline of Moses, it hasn't been that far from creation, because Noah, his grandfather, Methuselah, he could have easily sat on the lap of Adam, because Adam didn't die till after Methuselah was born. And then even after the flood, because that was just a couple generations after that, that Shem, the son of Noah, he was still alive when Abraham was born. You see that this period was not too far from the beginning in Genesis. And this time was very, very close to the creation. And even though that man had gone through very many changes by this time, where many people have drifted away and they went into all different kinds of idolatry from the beginning. And when you read this story in Genesis, we're not given any information about God, but very little is revealed about God, because God, he doesn't have an origin like we have. And there's not much record of what he did before creation, because he's eternal. So God, he existed before his creation, and he also exists above his creation. God, he's not part of his creation. God is separate from his creation. Now, pantheism is the belief that God is a part of everything and that everything is a part of God. And I don't know if you guys know Shirley MacLaine, but she made a big whoop, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. I don't know. I don't know how long it is anymore, but she said, I am God. I am God. Because that's the belief where everybody's part of God and God is part of everybody. And the trees are God and the ocean's God and God is in all of us. But we're not pantheists. We're Christians. And we believe that God is the creator of all things and that God is separate from his creation. And there's only one creator. And so there's a one creator, and then everything else is what he created. So we begin here, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the Hebrew word for created here is bara. And bara means created from nothing. means there was no manipulation of any substance, that there wasn't hydrogen molecules that he had reformed or anything like that. It means there was no existing matter. There was nothing. That's what bara is. And bara is used 3 times in this first chapter of Genesis. And it's only God that can create from nothing. Only God can do bara. Now, there's another word in Hebrew for creating, which means to be created from substances that are already present. And that word is asa. And asa is used here 7 times. And it's usually translated made, or God made something, or even with man, he out of the dirt of the earth, he created him, but he made him out of substances that were already present. That's all man can do is asa. He can't do bara. It's uniquely God, because God, he is not dependent on the universe. Actually, it's the universe that's totally dependent on God. And that's because he has that kind of authority. And if you've ever noticed, the Bible never fights with us or tries to convince us that there is a God or the existence of God. And when this was written, there wasn't any debates if there was a God. Everybody believed in a God. And it was just, which one did you believe in? And God made it plain that he would be able to be seen in his creation. And in Romans 1:20, it says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes were clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead." And so God, he can be seen in his creation. But besides just being able to be seen, he also tells us that he's placed it into everyone's heart. So those people who do not see God in creation, or they don't see God, it's only because they don't want to see God. But the world did not create itself, and it did not come about by chance. This universe, it is not eternal. And the word that Moses uses for God, this creator of the world, throughout all the beginning of Genesis, is this Hebrew word called Elohim. And this word Elohim is used in Genesis 32 times. And Elohim is the plural form of the word El. El is the word God. Elohim technically means gods. But this word is always used here as if it was a singular word, not a plural word. And so it says gods, but it actually means God. And every time they use a verb with it, or they use a pronoun with it, they're always singular. So their verbs have to match their nouns. It is saying God, and that's why they translate it God, but it actually means gods. And so what this is doing, God has given us a hint of the doctrine of Trinity from the very, very beginning here. That wasn't very clearly explained at all in the Old Testament. And we'll see more of this later when he gets to creating man, when he talks about let us create in our own image. So this Elohim, he's an intelligent designer. And I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist, and I'm not a great Christian apologist. I'm not going to pretend to be that. And so I'm not going to explain all these arguments, like the cosmological argument, where, everything that has a beginning has a cause. And then there's another argument, the teleological argument, that every design has a designer, but they are true. But there is a couple anthropic principles that I'd share with you. And anthropic principles, what they mean is principles of these things have to be around for sustaining of life on this planet. And one of them is about the gravity of the universe. The universe has exactly the right amount of gravity. If it had a larger gravitational force, it would get way too hot, and it would burn up quickly, and it wouldn't be able to support life. And if that force was any smaller, the stars would be too cool, because there would be no nuclear fusion, which means there would be absolutely no light or no heat. And even with our Earth, if our gravitational force was just a smidge different, we wouldn't have a sun. The sun couldn't exist. And there's a lot of books and there's a lot of movies by creation scientists, and they're good. Lee Strobel has a book. It's called A Case for the Creator. And then there's this movie called The Privileged Planet. They're great movies to explain all these things, and it's amazing. But Genesis, it wasn't written to be a scientific document. If it was written to be a scientific document, we wouldn't be able to understand it anyways. And in just the same way, Genesis was not written to be a historical document. Even though Jesus, he does quote from Genesis, and he quotes it like it is a historical record. And Genesis, it doesn't give us a detailed history of the world, but it does tell us our origins. And it tells us the origin of man, and it tells us also the origin of nations. What it does, what the Bible does, it'll take a line, it'll take a genealogy, and it'll only follow it so long, and then it'll drop it. It'll stop. Because the Bible is really only interested in one genealogy, and that's the line that leads to Jesus Christ. Because Genesis, along with the whole Bible, is written to achieve a purpose. And that purpose, it starts with creation, and then it reveals to us the fall of man, and then it tells us about those consequences from that fall of man. And then it tells us about the flood, the rebellion at Babel. But then it takes its focus and it focuses on Israel. It focuses on Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, because that's where Jesus is going to come from, because he's going to come from Israel. Okay, so now we're going to start. Verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's great. Verse 2, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. All right, we got 2 verses. And now we have our first Christian controversy. It's called the gap theory. I don't know if you guys have heard the gap theory or you believe in it. What it is that some Christians believe that there's this large amount of time that's between verse 1 and verse 2. And it's like a really huge amount of time. And the reason they give it this amount of time is because they're trying to help explain the fossil record. And it's okay if you believe. There's a lot of good Christians that actually believe the gap theory, and that's fine. But I don't think that the Bible supports it. And the reason I don't think the Bible supports it, first of all, in my own mind, I don't think God created the world to go void where he spends the next 6 days trying to fix what he broke. I don't think so. But also, in Romans 5:12, it says that death came through Adam. And you have to realize that fossils, they're only around because they died. That was because of death. And nothing died before the fall of man. And another reason they have this gap theory, they'll say that Satan fell probably during that period. But in Job, it tells us that the angels, that they witnessed the creation of heaven and earth. But if you believe it, that's fine. And I understand that some people have a hard time with science and trying to make science fit into our view of God. But I don't really think we have to. The whole thing is just so impossible. It doesn't make sense without a God anyways. So now in the second part of verse 2, we see the Spirit of God, and he's hovering over the water. You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.